my diaper bag. I am a scientist in the laboratory of life. My experiment, raising boy-girl twins. So what could I, a bleary-eyed mother of rambunctious 3-year-olds, possibly have to share with you, the smart cosmopolitan audience, today? Let me just paint you a picture of my morning. I'm running around trying not to trip over toy cars and little plastic ponies. My kids are screaming for oatmeal and diaper changes. My brain is a soggy mess, and I can't even find matching tights. But this morning's chaos couldn't keep me from you, because I do have something to share. You see, I have 3-year-old twins and a PhD. I'm a scholar of gender and American culture, and I have learned more about gender from my children than I have from any book or article I've studied, read, or written over the past 20 years. So what have I learned? The idea I want to share is this. We can learn from children to embrace paradox and get out of our gender binary zones. What do I mean by gender binary zones? I'm going to tell you, and I'm also going to tell you why I think they're a problem. And then I'm going to share with you a little bit about what I'm observing in my own petri dish at home. And finally, I'm going to give you 3 binary-breaking bits of information intended to help you break through the binaries that limit our lives and subsequently, I believe, our worlds. So let's begin. Gender binary zones, or what I like to think of as the pink-blue filter. Everyone has a sex and a gender. Sex, male, female, is a biological designation. It's rooted in anatomy, in our bodies. Gender, the idea that someone or something is masculine or feminine, is a social construct, which is just a fancy word to say made up and cemented by the people around us. Now, traits that are commonly stereotyped as masculine include logical, unemotional, rational. On the feminine side of stereotypes, we have emotional, passive, subordinate. And the idea that there are only 2 genders, masculine and feminine, is itself a binary that is being increasingly challenged today. But we humans, and particularly we humans here in the West, love to think about contrast. We love our binaries, our oppositions. We live in a red state or a blue state. Some say that there may even be a psychobiological component to this kind of thinking. According to the developmental psychologists, the first contrast we grasp as infants is big-little. The second, many say, and I think we can count Freud among them, is male-female. So we have a very deep-seated inclination to think in binary terms when it comes to gender. So why is this a problem? Sociologists believe that gender is not just a matter of difference, but of power, meaning that unlearning gender may be a precursor to real social progress and social change. Let me just break that down. Less hypergendered childhoods, meaning childhoods that are free of the mandatory association of a girl with a doll or a boy with a truck, may lead to greater gender equality for those boys and girls when they grow up. It's a pretty freaky looking Spider-Man, I know. Now, it's a little bit chicken or egg, but studies show that in cultures and countries where boys and girls are both encouraged, for example, to tend house, you have greater work-life policies later on for men and women alike, and that's a good thing. So I find it really interesting, then, that even as the experts decry the dangers of hypergendered childhood, and even as, in the real world, boys and girls and men and women are achieving greater parity, greater equality, the American nursery is only becoming more pink and more blue. These images that I just showed you were from a Swedish toy catalog. Let me take a look at what the catalogs for baby products look like here in the US. Here we have a diamond ring rattle for a sweet baby girl and a hammer and rattle for a busy baby boy. I could have picked any number of picture to bring to you today, but you get the point. In America, girl nurseries come in pink and boy nurseries come in blue. Now, contrary to what you might think when you're pushing your cart down the pink and blue aisles of your local Babies R Us, searching for that perfect baby present for your newly arrived niece, girls weren't born loving pink. And there is nothing set in stone about a boy loving blue. In fact, children weren't color-coded by gender until the early 20th century, at which time childcare experts felt that infants needed to be differentiated earlier on. Before that time, infants all wore white. And when nursery colors were first introduced, pink was a boy color. It was associated with red, a muted shade, a pastel version of red, and red was a color associated with strength. Blue was a girl color. It was the color of the Virgin Mary, and it was associated with qualities like faithfulness, constancy, loyalty. These were all qualities that symbolized femininity at the time. So you can see that the associations we give to, say, pink and blue are not only socially constructed, they're historically made up. They're historically made up. And yet, one look at the decorations at a gender reveal party, a new phenomenon that's going on in this country, tells us that we are more obsessed with gendering our fetuses in rigid ways than ever before. A gender reveal party, for those not yet in the know, is a party. A gender reveal party is a gathering where expectant parents gather their friends and reveal the gender of their impending child. Now, instead of reading the ultrasound result in the doctor's office when they go to get the ultrasound where they can find out fetal sex, they instead slip it in an envelope, give it to their baker, who makes a neutral frosting and sends it to the party. The expectant parent or parents cut the cake and it's a pink, it's a blue, congratulations. So again, this is not necessarily a good thing. We're obsessed with gendering our children before they're even here. Now, social scientists and theorists have long told us that parents reproduce gender. Parents pass it on. And the neuroscientists are now starting to tell us that that may be literally true. In other words, parents' ideas about gender influence the way they behave towards their kids, which in turn influences the wiring of those young plastic brains. So even though girls aren't coming out of the womb loving pink and boys blue, if we surround them with certain colors and certain toys and treat them in certain ways, we may be in fact setting their preferences for them later on. Now, I didn't have a gender reveal party, but what I revealed to myself about gender and the way I was gendering my fetuses surprised me. When I was 20 weeks pregnant, we learned the sex of our twins. We learned the sex, I should tell you, because I have the willpower the size of a flea, and I just couldn't wait to find out. So we learned we were having, as they say, one of each, a boy and a girl. And I was a high-risk pregnancy, and I was getting frequent ultrasounds. So by month 7 or 8, we started to really know where the boy and girl were each lodged inside my belly because they were jutting out in very particular ways. Now, my husband is a very visual thinker, and I spent whatever free time I had during my pregnancy lying on my couch on my side, and my husband spent whatever free time he had staring at me incredulously lying on the couch. I'm not a very big person, and I was really, really large. So one day, he, a visual thinker, cocks his head, looks at me, looks at my belly, and says, "You know, the boy looks like a mountain, and the girl looks like a rolling hill." And those became our nicknames, Mountain and Rolling Hill. Now, I would be embarrassed to admit this to you, me, a so-called gender scholar, calling my boy a mountain and my girl just a little hill, if it weren't freakishly common among expecting parents. In 1986, when amniocentesis allowed women to determine fetal sex, a sociologist named Barbara Katz-Rothman interviewed 120 women, asking them to describe their fetus's movements once they knew what they were having. So those who were having girls described gentle, quiet, rolling, reassuring movements, lively, but not excessively energetic. And those who were having boys described jabs, punches, kicks, a saga of earthquakes. Now, tellingly, those who didn't find out what sex they were having, the control group, didn't use this kind of stereotyped language. So there's something real going on. Now, I think that once our kids are on the outside, the gendering becomes even more intense. You know, when they're inside, we think about all the idealized things we'll do with those boys and girls. It's a boy, we'll play catch and roughhouse. It's a girl, we'll have tea parties and go shopping. But once they're on the outside, it just doesn't stop. When my twins arrived, the gifts and hand-me-downs rolled in, gendered down to the bib. It was a recession, so we kept most everything that came our way, grateful for the generosity of friends. We sometimes put the bib on the little boy and the blue bib on the little girl, just probably because that was what was at the top of the pile. You know, I was an anthropologist in the belly of the beast all of a sudden, and the beasts were outside my belly, and I felt sort of helpless to fight this pink and blue wave that was upon us. So sometimes, in the dark of night, I would take the pair of pink pajamas that somebody bought for our little girl, and I'd put them on our son, just to make a point. You know, it was like, gotcha, gender. And as time went on, I went further. I started reversing the pronouns of the characters in their books, snuggling bunnies and pouncing rats, and I had read about fire women instead of firemen. And one day, mid-read, I just looked down at my babies, and I was looking at them, looking up at me, and I realized they're probably just wondering how that book tastes. And then one day, this happened. That's my little boy wielding a hammer, a drill, and in his words, a shaver. And that's my little girl. What's your favorite color?
Pink.
Why do you like pink so much?
Because I have a coat.
I realized something. I realized that I and every other parent and teacher and grandparent and uncle and aunt who's interested in raising sensitive boys and strong girls was imposing some very adult-sized theories on my little ones. And I realized that by reversing things, I wasn't breaking any binary, I was merely reinforcing one. You know, Susan Sontag once wrote that the only interesting answers are those that destroy the questions. And it occurred to me, what if we turned this equation around? What if instead of asking how we can expansively nurture the gender development of our young, what if we asked instead, what can we, the adults, learn about gender from the very young? We can learn from children to embrace paradox and get out of our binary zones. I'd like to leave you with 3 messages. Embrace the purple, look beyond the pink and blue. This applies not just to gender, but to all the binaries and categories that we live with. You know, understand the limits of our perceptions, and that life, while we like to think in terms of red, blue, pink, blue, life is messy, and it's more often lived in a kind of purple hue. So, you know, under age 2, children themselves don't know what gender they are. They are objective observers. Somewhere between 2 and 3, they start to figure it out, and by 3, they become the gender police. Because when your identity is just forming, you do everything in your power to shore it up. But under age 3, kids are natural gender benders, and we can learn from them to live messy, and that human reality often trumps our attempts to categorize it and box it in. Which brings me to number 2. With great power, there's great power in modeling gender identity and behavior, but there's also great responsibility here, and ultimately we can't superimpose. You know, our kids, what they come to us with It's going to be very much set by them. The developmental psychologists tell us that we can give them all sorts of messages and, about breaking down stereotypes, but who they are is who they are. And that lesson applies not just for a parent who's trying to mold his gay kid into a straight one, but for a parent like me who might try to steer her daughter away from pink, but think pink looks just marvelous on her son. I'm reminded of Khalil Gibran, who writes, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams." Now, as we witness a widening acknowledgement that there are more than two genders, and as we learn from trans youth and pink boys and princess boys and gender nonconforming kids and gender conforming kids alike, those houses of tomorrow may look very different from the pink and blue nurseries that we envision today. This is Nils Pickert and his son. Nils and his son live in a small, traditional German town, and his son likes to wear dresses. He gets made fun of. So one day, his father said in his words, "I decided to broaden my shoulders for my little buddy and walk down the street in a skirt." Which brings me to my last point. Yeah, he gets the Father of the Year award. Small change leads to big change. Small eyes are watching. Small change grows up and changes the world. To be sure, it's unrealistic that the majority, if gender is really about power, that the majority will ever voluntarily go purple. But, just like it's unrealistic that the 1% will turn socialist. And yet, over time, when change is supported from above and below and within, change happens. It's true. So I invite you to continue this conversation. Follow me on Twitter, visit me at my website, and when you leave here tonight, think about how you can break through your binaries. Challenge your assumptions. Embrace the purple. Believe that such an embrace might result in advancing our society in ways we can't even yet see. Challenge the assumptions of those that you walked in with. Challenge those you hold about yourself. Who would we be as individuals if we weren't categorically typed from first whale? Who might you become? Thank you.